Hello everyone and welcome to a most exciting game from round 2 of the Zagreb Grand Chess Tour being played in Croatia. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Viswanathan Anand. The two old rivals are brawling it out again. Before we check out the game, I do have a very short announcement. My father was supposed to go to a ZZ Top concert in Austria in 2 days on the 29th of June, but he decided not to go. If any of you are interested, maybe if you're from Austria, if you're interested in going to Austria, if you want to check out the concert, just contact me via any, either via Gmail or Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, doesn't really matter. So if any of you are interested, whoever contacts me first will be given the ticket to the concert. So that being said, let's check out the game. Carlsen with the white pieces opens with d4. We have knight to f6 by Anand, c4, we have e6, and of course you all know where this is going, knight to f3 and d5, we have the queen's gambit declined on the board, and they will be following the game the two of them already played in the Altibox Norway Championship this year, but also Carlsen played a very similar line against Levon Arjan in the Grand Chess Classic, so let's see what happens. Knight to c3 by Carlsen with d captures on c4 and now e4, preparing to recapture on c4, and bishop to b4 now. With bishop to g5 by Carlsen, c5 now, and now captures on c4. We have c captures on d4, knight captures on d4, and now, of course, the capture on c3. It is the main line. We have b captures and queen to a5. And here, Carlsen already had his position against Arjan in the Grand Chess Classic and against Vichy in the Altibox Norway Championship. Here, he played bishop to d2 against Arjan, and he won a game against Arjan in Grand but he played knight to b5 against Anand in Norway Chess, and that game ended in a draw. But here, Carlsen decides to go for the main line, which is bishop to b5. This comes with check, and, well, obviously he prepared something new in the main line. With bishop to d7, bishop captures on f6 first, and now you can either capture g captures on f6, or you can go for this capture on c3 first. Captures on c3 is a bad move. It has been played, although it pretty much loses the game, because after king f1, yes, you capture the bishop with check, but after knight captures here, you open up an attack against the black queen, also threatening knight to c7 check, and here black will just lose a lot of material. If queen captures, you will deliver this check, king e7, knight captures here, and you will have no problems escaping with the knight. So after bishop captures, we have g captures on f6, and now bishop captures on d7, going for more trades. Knight captures on d7, and here you don't gain anything by trying to protect the c3 pawn. Carlsen just castles. Anand grabs the pawn with queen captures on c3, and now comes queen to a4. Now saying to black, if you castle, I'm going to capture your knight. So what do you want to do here? And interestingly, of course, Anand castles. It's not a problem, because now if you capture, then you get this rook 8 to d8 move. It has been played before. I think Morozevich had one game with the black pieces in this line, and then of course after you move the king, the queen, you will get queen captures on d4. Black recaptures the piece, and black will black's pawn structure is a bit messed up on the king side, but it's not really an issue. Black can just move the king, place the rooks on the g file, and use them for attack, let's say. So instead, after castles, Carlsen goes knight captures on e6 first. Now, if you capture here, only then will I capture your knight, while I've already recaptured a pawn. So knight to b6 with an attack on the queen, with queen to d4, offering a trade of queens, and now rook f to c8, defending the queen. So still f captures on e6 is a threat. Here, Carlsen decides to trade. We have queen captures, rook captures, and now comes knight to f4. You can no longer leave your knight on e6. And now rook to c5, preparing f5 to get rid of his doubled pawn and, capture on e4, or maybe Magnus will capture on f5. Rook f to d1 now by Carlsen, and now f5 as planned, with e captures on f5, and here not recapturing immediately, but first rook a to c8. He wants to grab hold of the c file and gain full development. Carlsen says, okay, you're going to have to work for this pawn, so he pushes f6, and now Anand has to go for it with rook to f5 and now g3, defending the knight, but you do have to part with your f6 pawn. With rook captures on f6 and now rook to d3. with rook f to c6 back to the c file, and now rook to a3, asking what do you want to do with the a7 pawn. And here Anand first decides to get rid of one pair of rooks. We have rook c1 check, rook captures with check, we have king to g2, and now knight to c8, guarding the a7 pawn. He doesn't want to push any pawns, create some new weaknesses, so just bringing the knight back. You cannot attack it. The rook is defending it from the c file. But now rook to d3. Going for rook to d7, you want to start attacking these pawns from the 7th rank. So of course Anand prevents this. We have rook to c7, and now rook to d8 check. We have king to g7, and now h4. As Carlsen does have a 3-2 advantage on the king side. So first you're gonna want to try and play there, as it's unlikely that you will be able to pick up any of the queen side pawns where Anand has a 2-1 advantage. We have knight to e7 by Anand, and now knight to h5 check. g4 was also one of the suggestions, but knight to h5 is played here. And here it's strongest to go king to g6, but here Anand plays king to h6, and he allows Magnus some very nice tactics. Carlsen goes knight to f6, preparing to go knight to e8, followed by rook to d6 check. We have king to g6 now, pushing the knight back, knight to e8, and now you have to decide. Either you're going to allow rook d6 check, or you're going to defend the 6th rank with the rook and allow rook to d7. Allowing this check is very dangerous. For example, if you play some move, let's say this, try and force a trade, then rook d6 will be very dangerous, because the knight controls this square, rook controls these squares, g5 is taken. If you go to h5, then something like king h3 followed by g4 will be deadly. So you would have to go king f5, and then after knight to g7 check, you're going to have to go down the board. And now again white will get rook d7 at some point, attacking the knight, attacking the knight, attacking the pawn on b7, and the black king, although active, is a bit too active for his own good. So after knight d8, Anand decides to keep an eye on the 6th rank, so rook to c6, and now comes rook to d7. Carlsen gets his double attack here, and now while you could play something like knight to c8 to try and give up the b7 pawn, Anand finds a different idea. First, rook to e6, keeping an eye on the knight here, as the knight was under attack, but here Carlsen pushes h5. And now, of course, you don't want to capture it. If you capture it, you get knight g7 check. You lose the rook and the game, of course. So after h5, we have king back to h6, and now knight to d6 by Carlsen, going after the pawn, but with the knight. He still wants to keep his rook here. We have, although if you capture with the rook, for example, rook captures here, it's going to be very hard to get the rook out of there. Black's going to go knight to c8, open up an attack against Carlsen's knight here, and after you move the knight c7, only square available to the knight, Black's going to go rook e7, and you're never moving your pieces from these squares again. After king h6, we have knight to d6, now going after the pawn with the knight, and now comes f5 by Anand. He says, okay, maybe you want to capture my knight, and then I can capture your knight. But the idea is, if you capture the knight, you cannot capture the rook, because knight f5 check again picks up the rook, and you would just be up a piece. Here with knight captures on b7 by Carlsen, it is the strongest move, and now knight to g8 by Anand. We have knight back to d6, attacking the a7 pawn, but now knight to f6, going after the rook here. If you tried something like king to g5 to defend your f5 pawn, then ideas like f4 become possible, and after king captures on h5, you will again have knight captures on f5. King g6, now g4 is coming, and it will be very unpleasant to play this for black. After this knight to d6 move, we have knight to f6 by Anand, and now knight captures on f5 with check. King to g5, and now knight to d4, attacking Anand's rook, and here you have to decide. Do you want to trade and go into this knight and pawn endgame, or do you want to go rook to a6? Rook to a6 is very interesting, because after rook to a6, you allow ideas like f4 check. And then after king captures on h5, you're going to go rook to g7. Cut the king off from entering the game, and then your plan is king to h3. You're going to push g4 here, you're going to go knight to f5, and it will be very hard for black to defend. Even if you capture this with check, King h3, now you have to prevent rook g5 check. Rook g5 check will be followed by knight to f5 checkmate, so you have to prevent it. Rook a5, but then you get knight to e6, and after any move by black, you're gonna go knight to f8. Rook d5, you're gonna go rook to f7, attack the knight, and after rook to d6, defending the knight, you're gonna go g4 check. King to h6, and only now, or if you capture it, if you go to h6, you're getting mated. Just king to h4, and there's no preventing g5. Whatever you do, g5 is coming, and it's game over. So here, after g4 check, you'll probably have to, I mean, you will have to capture it, and then you get rook f5 check, king to h6, and just king captures on g4. You are up a piece. Even though you can try and harass this knight, and the knight currently has no escape route, you will simply bring your king over to e5, and then the knight will be able to jump back to this square. So not a problem. For example, whatever you play, a5, you're just gonna go king e4, rook to a6, whatever, king e5, and now the knight can come back into the game, and you'll have plenty of time to stop the passed a pawn. So very interesting idea, rook to a6, but even this is with the best defense for black, and it's hard to play the best defense when your king has so few squares to go to. Anand decides against this. He decides to go into the knight and pawn endgame. We have knight captures, first knight captures on d7, knight captures on e6, and now king captures on h5. And here, king to f3 by Carlsen. So Carlsen is up a pawn, but still it's not all that clear how you're gonna move forward from this point. We have king to g6 by Anand, now king to f4. King to f6, and now knight to g5, going after the h7 pawn. We have h6, and now knight to e4 with check, pushing the king back. King to e6, and here Carlsen played king to g4, and this is not the most appropriate way to deal with this endgame. It's there, of course, the line I'm going to show is from Sese, so of course it's not to be expected for anyone to play it, but f3 is the way to go. And after black makes a move, let's say knight e5, you want to go g4, and now use the g3 square to bring your knight over to f5 to harass the h6 pawn from here, and then you will force black to move all the way back with the king before continuing to improve the position of your own king. So this is the most precise way to go about it, but okay, we have king to g4 by Carlsen, king to e5, and now we have f3, defending the knight. But here Anand finds the most precise way to defend, king to d4. And now if the white king attacks the h-pawn, now you go king here and you attack the weak f3 pawn. So what do you do here? Well, you could go knight to d6. This is one way to go about it. And then after knight e5 check, you can go king f4, knight d3 check, king f5, and then after knight to c1, you'll go knight to b5 check. King d5, you can trade everything, knight captures, and then you will have this position where both knights are on the rim, but you have a 2-to-1 advantage on the king side. And although it should be winning, it's still, you know, there's a lot of play to it. But here again, Carlsen went king to f5, and he allowed king to e3 by Anand. With f4, now of course you don't want to allow black to capture, and now h5. And here Carlsen really went into a deep think, as he probably figured out that he messed it up somewhere. He doesn't know where, as it's a disgusting engine line, but you know, still he took a lot of time here. I think some 30 minutes to figure out where to go from here. And if you try something like a4, it's a line that we're going to show. Then you get king to f3. King to e6 attacks the knight, knight f8 check, and then after king to e5, you're just going to repeat knight g6 check, king to f5, you're going to repeat knight e7 check, king e5, knight c6 check, and you're not going to be making any progress. So here, Carlsen, after some 30 minutes of thought, played knight g5, which is very nice because here Anand has a very clean draw, but he didn't go for it. And king to f2 is a beautiful draw, because king to f2 is a forcing line that goes g4, h captures, king captures, and now king to e3. And now basically what you want to do is give up your knight for this pawn, and charge your king over to the queen side to win this pawn, and then white will be unable to win with even being up a knight. Basically, king f5, knight c5 is the move to find, because now the knight completely controls the king. You cannot move away because you're going to lose the f pawn. You cannot go here. The knight guards this square. And the point being, if you go king to e5, doesn't really do anything because just knight d3 check wins the f4 pawn. And even if you try something like knight h3 to defend your pawn, doesn't really matter. Just knight d3. Black's gonna give up the knight. Let's say king g5. You're gonna give up the knight and run away and well, win this pawn. So white will be unable to win with the extra knight. So this was the nice draw Anand could have gone for, but Anand goes knight to c5, a different line. And now again, Carlsen has to decide what to do. Here, Carlsen played king to g6. He wants to go after this pawn here, but again, a move to he should have played is king to f6. And now after king f2, after you go after this pawn, you get f5. And now after king captures on g3, king to e7. And now the king will nicely guard all of the squares that this knight can use to attack this pawn. So here we would probably see h4, f6, but now knight to d3. Knight to d3, a sneaky move, because if you continue with f6, you would actually blunder greatly, as knight here, and you lose the pawn. Or you can promote to a queen and then knight to g6 check. After the king moves, you will win the queen, push h4, win white's knight, and it's very nicely done. So what you would have to do after knight d3, first you have to play king e6, prevent the knight from reaching the e5 square, and then after knight c5 check, you're gonna go king d6. Now h3, you wanna try and get this knight away from the defense of the e4 square, as black wants to play knight e4 check, pick up the f6 pawn, but white will just ignore it, where you're gonna have f7, h2, f8 queen, and now h1 queen, and you're gonna have this position. Still not not an easy anything, but it would be probably the best course of action for white. Here you cannot capture the knight because queen c1 would pick up the g5 knight, but you can play queen f5 and have a nice game. So this is one of the ways Carlsen could have played it, by king f6, just keeping an eye on the knight, but Carlsen decided to go king g6. He wants to win the h5 pawn and then try and push the f pawn. So, king to f2, now Anand finally gets the king to the f2 square with f5, king captures on g3, knight to e6 now. Carlsen hoping for this trade. Of course, Anand is not interested, as the f pawn would be promoted to the e pawn and it would be much too fast. So, knight to d7. Anand just keeping an eye on the f6 square. He says, if you ever push it, I'm just going to sacrifice my knight and I'm going to rush my king over to the queen side to win this pawn. My king is much faster than your king. So, king captures on h5 by Carlsen, and now king to f3. We have king to g5, and now king to e4, Anand rushing his king over to the queen side. We have knight to c7, and now a5. We have knight to b5 by Carlsen, king to d3 now. We have king to g6, and now we have a4 by Carlsen. By Anand. We have king to f7, trying to push the knight away, and now knight to e5 check. We have king to f6, and now knight to f3. And it's very interesting how this knight will be able to keep an eye on this pawn, but you will see. King e7, and now, of course, Carlsen wants to march his pass pawn forward. And here, it's again, it's a crossroad. Anand has to decide what to do here. Anand played king to c2, which is an interesting move, but again, there was a forced draw with knight to h2. Again, you cannot push f6 because knight to g4 attacks the pawn. f7, again knight e5, and you're in the same position that you were earlier. You will lose this pawn if you queen it. Just knight g6 check picks up the queen. So what you will have to do here, well, you will not have to do anything here as it wasn't played, but here Anand played king to c2 instead of this knight h2 line. He wants to grab the a2 pawn. So we have f6, and now comes knight to g5. Again, keeping an eye on this square here. But now Magnus goes for knight to d4 check. Very interesting. Carlsen had about 30 seconds on the clock at this position. Anand had about 13, I believe. So knight to d4 check, king to b2, and now comes knight to e6. Again, hoping for a trade, as his pass pawn will be much faster. With knight to h7 and now f7. So still you cannot queen the pawn, but Carlsen has knight to g5 planned. With king captures on a2 and now knight to g5. But now Anand starts pushing his own pass pawn as well. With a3, of course, you don't care about your knight anymore. With knight captures on h7, king to b1, and here, sorry, not b2. king to b1, and f8 queen. Finally, Magnus brings a queen into the game with a2 by Anand, and now queen to f5 check. Now, this is a known theoretical draw, with the knight being so far away. There's no way to actually win this, but Carlsen decided to give a few more checks. We have king b2, queen e5 check, king b1 with queen to e4 check, king to b2, queen to e2 check. Now king to b1, and here knight to f6. He tried to bring his knight into the game. So Anand finally gets a queen of his own back into the game with knight to d5, but now a series of checks from Anand just to show that he is, well prepared to draw this game, with king to d6 and now queen to f8 check, king e5, and here this is just beautiful. Magnus finishes the game with king to e5, which seems like he blunders the queen, and in fact he will lose the queen, but only temporarily. Queen to e8 was played by Vishy, king to d4, and now queen captures on e2. So Anand wins the queen, but Magnus has knight to c3 check, king to a1, and now knight captures on e2, and we have a draw by insufficient material. So I really enjoyed this entire game, everything about it. Anand's very strong defensive skills, Carlsen trying to grind it out but unable to do it, and then after a tough grind for some 78 moves, Carlsen decides to play this this beautiful line, king e5, and allow this beautiful trade of queens. But yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Really an impressive game, and it really just shows you how important it is to study the endgame, because here even Magnus Carlsen, world champion, who is known to be probably the greatest endgame player in the history of chess, missed his chances in this game. It just shows you how important it is to always keep brushing up on your endgame. But yeah, I do hope you enjoyed it. One of the more fighting draws I've seen in a while, so really enjoyed it. We do have the standings prepared, so let's check them out. It's from the Chess24 website, so a nice cross table. Jan Nepomniachtchi in first place, both wins with 2 points. Probably going to show his game against Caruana tomorrow morning, as it was really interesting. Then followed by 1.5 point by Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So, then a series of 1-pointers. Fabiano Caruana, Maxim Vachier-Lagrave, Shahriar Mamedyarov, Levon Aronian, Sergei Karyakin, and then with only half a point, Dingliren, Anish Giri, Viswanathan Anand, and Hikaru Nakamura. So that being said, I do hope you enjoyed it once again. I would like to thank John Roberts for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check all my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Most likely continuing the coverage of the Grand Chess Tour in Croatia and Zagreb, but also checking up on your suggestions if something really, extraordinary happens. Thank you all. I will see you soon. Have an excellent rest of your day.